This video takes you through logging in, the user dashboard, global settings, user permissions, and pupil management.
Good morning. The purpose of this video is to give you a very quick introduction to the Onwards and Upwards system. So what you see on the screen right now is the login screen, which you come through via your unique URL. Each user has their personal login details. You can utilize two-step authentication for login should you require. It is not a system requirement, it is a school preference, but two-step authentication is available over and above standard user login credentials. So if I log into as our support account, just for this demonstration purposes. So when a user logs in, they come on to what we call a dashboard. So you see the dashboard is selected on the tab, and on this dashboard I have two performance dial items, so each user can choose which dial items, if any, they wish to put onto the dashboard. Each user will also receive on the dashboard various notifications. Those notifications are relevant to them and the content and what they have access to. So they'll be more prominent for some users than others. So in terms of navigation, we have 4 tabs across the top. The dashboard we're currently on, the assessment area, which is where staff are typically recording what pupils are able to do and submitting evidence where appropriate. You can also do a number of other things within this assessment area, like look at history, also setting targets, adding personalised outcomes, and so on. But fundamentally, it's used by staff for assessing pupils where they currently are and what they can do. Analysis is used for all of reporting purposes, and settings is for use by system management, and initial system setup is all done within the settings function. Forms, which you see here in the top left hand side, is a system in its own right. So forms allows you to utilize the system for recording all sorts of other information. So if we call it forms because basically anything that you do in school that utilizes a form to capture some information about something, and that form potentially be submitted for authorization and maybe for some onward analysis. So anything, if you can design it on a form, if you have it on a form, it can be built within this system. So in one extreme may be something like a staff holiday request form where you have some basic fields and then it needs an authorization with a yes or a no. You may have forms for accidents and injuries, for behavioral issues, for safeguarding records. Pretty much anything that you need a form to capture some information on and subsequently review and do analysis on can be done within this system. But we'll come back to that in a separate session. So if I go through, as I say, these other tabs, so we'll come back to assessment and analysis, but very quickly review settings. So there are a number of fields here. So you have some global settings, which is just overarching out the system and displays your pupils, what's some of the performance bands that I used. Users, as I say, users have a unique login, so you can very quickly add new users manually in the system, or you can import a list of users via an Excel spreadsheet. So users need to have their password, and the system needs to know what that user should or should not be allowed to do. So to grant access for a particular teacher, you can either select which aspects of the system they should be able to access and which pupils or classes they should be able to access, or alternatively you can assign them to a user group. So if I look at the teacher user group in this example, they can record progress They can fill in forms if forms exist, and they can do some analysis, but they can do very little else. If I look at the other extreme, I look at the administrators group as we have it here, administrators can do pretty much everything that possibly can be done in the system. But these groups can be, they don't have to have these three groups. You may have a teaching assistant group, or you may have whatever other groups you want. So you're in complete control of what users can access, what they can't access, and what they can do. Again, you can also create parent accounts. Parents, if you've granted them an account, don't get carte blanche ability to look around the system and look at whatever they want. What parents get access to is specific pieces of evidence that you choose to share with them. Okay, so we'll cover that in more detail when I look at the assessment aspects and adding evidence shortly. But you can communicate with parents via the system should you wish to utilize that functionality. I just flip to pupils. So again, pupils in the system, so we have the entire school. This is organized by class, but they could all be organized by year group and so on, whatever you wish to. So pupils have attributes, so name, unique pupil number, date of birth, what ethnicity, whether they're looked after children, SEN types, and you can also have customized fields should you wish. And you can also add a pupil photo, which is then visible within the system. So this is where you're generally managing the pupil information. You can get this content in there by adding pupils and editing pupils. You can also do an import. So if you're using Sims or something similar, you can export the data from Sims as frequently as you want and import it into the system. So when you do an import, what it does, it cross-checks the unique pupil number. If the UPN already exists, it will update the pupil's attributes if relevant. If a UPN does not exist, it will then create that pupil within the system. So very easy to manage. When pupils leave, you can archive those pupils, so information is not lost. It's still accessible via the system, but pupils that have left and archived are not generally visible to your staff throughout the system. So whilst we're in settings, we can also set up very simple or complex cohort groups as you wish. So you can set up a new cohort, define the parameters that you want. So, if you want year 8 pupils that are male and they're visually impaired, or whatever combinations that you want, you can create those groupings and then save that as a cohort for use within the reporting functions later. You can also manage targets within settings. So targets in the Onwards and Upwards system are specific, measurable expectations that you have of pupils. So we'll talk more about that when I'm in the assessment screen. But you can manage adding targets via an import and editing and deleting and so on targets within this area.